Daryl, I was listening to your most recent episode while I was shoveling the driveway over the weekend. And it's funny because I have absolutely been feeling the January tax right
Mm.
now. And I called it a January hangover or a holiday hangover. I like your January tax feels like a more legitimate, grown up way to put it.
Yes, and I want everybody to be listening to my podcast while they're doing something productive, like shoveling the driveway. And literally, the January tax shows me that you are paying it because you're out there doing stuff. But
Yep.
yeah, I think we forget sometimes what we're working against. And I think a lot of times in the human psyche, we just expect that we should do things or we get mad at ourselves that we're not doing things. So the January tax is something that is happening for all of us. And it's kind of a baseline level when you look at, okay, the holidays have just happened. I was off my diet. I was indulging in whatever way possible. I was probably high anxiety in a good way of it's the holidays and like we got to go, or the not so great ways of like I have to see that particular relative. So all that what that does neuropsychologically is it resets our baseline and we start to need more dopamine in January because really what it is it feels very boring and we have to work that much harder for things to feel, being the operative word, like we're productive or like it matters or like we're having fun again. So the January tax really is understanding that and structuring your life as such so you can pay that tax and move on maybe more quickly than you would have not knowing that you needed to pay that.
So
I was just going to say, I listened to it too, and I feel exactly that way after coming back from the holidays and just like getting in and getting going again and like having that reset is very difficult mentally.
yeah, it's
It's
exhausting.
not.
It almost makes me not want to take time off.
Yeah.
Or like I need to like just take like it's like I'm just shifting into a lower gear or something. So I've slowly, which I understand there'd be like then I'm like in the background always on and never really off, and then that will just burn me out. But it's a struggle right now.
And I think with entrepreneurs, I think if you are running your own business or you literally are the boss, or maybe you're in a position where you do have to be a little bit on all the time, there's a way to do that that's sustainable. You can't be on high alert, right? You can't react to everything if you're going to be on all the time. You have to learn how to respond to it. And there's a difference between reaction and response. A reaction is kind of that visceral, okay, like I'm all in, or that email and now I'm jumping up out of bed, which sometimes we need. But a response is, okay, I have curated a time to do this in. I have made sure that it makes sense and I am in control of what the narrative is, or when I do this, or how I do this. And it's a little bit more intentional and purposeful. So it's hard because I work with a lot of people where leaning out is not an option during the holidays. One, because they can't, and two, because the reentry is rough. So I think there is a way to be on-ish without having fully to turn off. It's just being incredibly self-aware and mindful that how you do that matters.
Yeah. It seems like to me it would have been a much better adjustment had I been 20 to 30% on during the holidays versus like trying to actually be on break because I'm always checking my emails at night and doing all that kind of stuff. And I tried to make a concerted effort to not do that when I was on vacation. And then the reboot has felt like I've been in mud like the last week.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's something to that.
Welcome to the Compound Growth Podcast with Colin and Wheeler, where we talk all things growth. From financial growth to career growth, personal development to societal progress, we explore how each layer builds on the next, compounding over time to shape who we become. Each week, we break down complex ideas and emerging trends into clear, actionable insights. Because growth isn't just about numbers, it's about understanding the world and our place in it. The information in this material is for general information only, and is not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Investment advice offered through Integrated Partners, doing business as Ko-Fi Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor. Integrated Partners does not provide legal, tax, mortgage, advice, or services. Please consult your legal tax advisor regarding your specific situation. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. The economic forecasts set forth in this material may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that the strategies promoted will be successful.
We dove right into it this week, which is always the case with you, Daryl, because I always feel like there's so much we want to pull out of you in a short and limited time. So what we usually do when we have a guest on is we ask ChatGPT to write a quick bio. So I'm going to tell you what ChatGPT says about Dr. Daryl Appleton.
I'm a little nervous. Okay.
Dr. Daryl Appleton is an award-winning executive coach, licensed psychotherapist, and leadership strategist who helps high-performance professionals and organizations redefine success in using enhanced emotional intelligence, sustainable and science-backed pathways to peak performance. And that last part is always what I've really appreciated about you, your podcast, the balance of the emotional side, like the insight that you bring to understanding who we are and what we're feeling, and then bringing on the other side of that the science-backed takeaways. It provides perspective and understanding on a multi-layered approach that when Colin and I were working with you, and I'll divulge that we've enjoyed and benefited from our time with you in the past. That was always my favorite part. Like, you understood who I was and you would validate me, right? And then you would also help me understand why that was happening scientifically.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of mistrust in information right now. ChatGPT, that was great. Thank you, ChatGPT. I'm also incredibly good looking and very fit. I want ChatGPT to add that. No, I'm kidding.
That will come across on YouTube.
Save those notes.
I'm just putting stuff in for SEO and the algorithm to start to redefine what that is. No, I'm just kidding. But I think there's something to be said about we have so much information out there right now. And for me, and even when I was doing my dissertation and I started my career at Brown University doing research, it was heavy, right? Research is heavy, and understanding and disseminating things like neuropsychology feels really scary. But at the end of the day, if you can understand it, you can use it as a tool. So I help people kind of break through all the jargon and say it simply, because that to me is the most important things. If I can't explain it to you simply, I'm not doing my job. Because our job in the therapy field and the executive coaching field is really to be a mirror and be able to reflect back. And in my mind, if you can't do that succinctly, if you can't do that simply, you got to work on that. So thank you for saying all of that. I appreciate it deeply. But I do really love practice and application and how science informs that, because they go together so nicely. You can't just practice however you want or make plans however you want without the structure in place based on the data points. It's kind of like what you guys do, right? You're not going to make a financial plan for your clients without understanding what their goals are or what their financial picture looks like on top of what the markets do. It's very similar. So a lot of times when people are talking about self-improvement or leadership or team dynamics, I think we blanket apply what we've seen on Instagram and TikTok instead of understanding the actual mechanisms behind why it works.
When we originally first came to you, Wheeler and I, as you know, are different people, and Wheeler and I both know that as well.
We have a matching wardrobe and also just
Matching
approach
haircut
to
now,
life.
too.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
while we don't look different, we are different people. But with that being said, something that I really appreciated when we first started working with you is the way that I think and operate is completely different to the way that Wheeler thinks and operates. And I felt like you were able to frame things for me in a way that was very effective, that I could walk away with action items, because that's just the way that I work. And Wheeler was able to do the same on his end too. So the blanket statements that you were just talking about, I have always felt haven't really applied to me in a lot of ways, because I just never came to terms with them and it just didn't resonate with me. So I think, to your point, reflecting in a mirror back kind of how that person's feeling and making sure that they relate to the advice is super important, has been great for me.
And it's what great leaders do, right? It's almost, I was an athlete in college. I played basketball overseas for a hot second. And I found that the best coaches I had knew how to coach each player and knew how to speak to them in a way that mattered and motivate them. So, you guys leading your team too, hopefully that resonates in, okay, so and so might need me to talk to them a little bit differently, or they might need this type of structure and I can help them with that. Or Wheeler's going to handle this one because he might be able to take this particular person on a bit more as I'm going to take on this person. And that's what I've always loved working about you guys. You are very different, but I think the way you work together and understand each other is incredibly important. And that's what I want for all teams of any size to be able to do and understand. And it starts with a deep level of self-awareness.
Mm.
Yeah, that's actually it's funny because we've talked about this a lot with Tori while we've tried to figure out and hone what this podcast is, and making sure that it's meeting both of our needs. It's kind of showing who we each are individually, and we both have visions and goals and plans and ideas, and sometimes kind of meshing that together can be really hard. And I think one thing that we've been told a lot, Colin and I, is that like we have a unique approach to the way that we run our business. There's usually like one figurehead or maybe like a larger number of partners. But when Colin and I approach things, everything 50-50 is very much like a marriage. And it does require a lot of back and forth. And that's also something that I think that I've always enjoyed about your podcast and our time working with you is that like you bring that real life understanding as well. You'll talk about your marriage, you'll talk about like your work relationships, and you kind of bring things down to a more personal level.
It's interesting because we are taught, in the therapy world, right, putting that hat on, to keep who we are completely out of it. But I have always thought that if you are sitting with somebody and they are sharing the deepest parts of themselves when appropriate or when meaningful, it's okay to show that you also are human too. And again, doesn't mean that it's about you, but it's the ability to be relatable. And that's really, I was at a conference yesterday. It was mostly for like influencers and creatives. And I was asked to speak on this wellness panel. And it was shocking, right? Because like it's a completely different field than I'm used to talking in, of people being so exposed online, like sharing every part of their life. And it was really cool to meet these women and to just hear their stories. And I realized that that was part of the reason that I got online, to show that, especially for women, having it all is a myth. And this idea of perfect family, perfect life, perfect hair, perfect career, that is something that's held people, especially women, back. So part of being online for me has also been to show the hopefully controlled chaos, sometimes the not controlled chaos of being a working mom who works with people, 8, 9, 10 figure individuals and companies and does very, intense things, and also has to like come home and clean the effing dishes out of the sink because nobody's done them. Like that dichotomy, I think, is really important for people to understand that just because you're giving it all at work doesn't mean that life isn't going to demand things from you. And just because life feels really heavy right now doesn't mean that work is always going to be a hindrance in that. And like how to navigate through those things, I think, is incredibly important. I appreciate you saying that because I do think that it's valuable. But for all of you listening out there who might be in therapy or going to therapy, yes, you need to do it appropriately. It's not all the time. So don't misunderstand what we're talking about.
Yeah,
Disclaimer,
authenticity,
everyone.
right? Yeah.
Yes.
See, this is why I tell Jess. Jess likes to complain that I will completely butcher either her perspective, whatever she said, her point of view. I will it will be an endearing effort on my part, but like she wants to have kind of like a Jess's corner. Like, here are all the things that Wheeler said wrong in the last 4 episodes of the podcast. But I do feel like it's really valuable for people to understand like us as people. And that's why we still send our Christmas card every year, or holiday card as it is now. People like to see that we have real lives. And to your point, people are people, right? They could be highly functioning CEOs or creatives in Hollywood, but it's just nice to know that we all have a lot of the same problems and a lot of the same feelings. And that's actually kind of what we're going to dig into a little bit more today, talking about, the feelings and identifying them not as obstacles for our growth, but opportunities and green lights.
Yes, you know how I feel about feelings. I think feelings are real and they are valid, but they are not facts. So if you are making decisions solely based on feelings, I'm gonna stop you right there because at some point there's going to be an issue with that. And my opinion, what I think, what I feel, what I have seen happen is that if you do not put some sort of structure to understanding your feelings, you are going to find yourself feeling too much, too deeply about everything. And guess what? At the end of the day, it doesn't mean that any of it is true except to you. And that sounds really harsh, but you guys know me and your listeners might not. I'm from Jersey. I say things very directly because I believe in that. There's something about understanding that what you feel and what you need to do can feel very opposite and you can honor both. So I'm a fan of digging into your feelings with a purpose, but I'm even more of a fan of understanding who you are and who you're not. Because I think that feelings sometimes give us license to behave in a way because I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm upset because that to me from an executive coaching standpoint isn't enough. And I think moving the needle is not asking yourself, why questions? Why is this happening? Why are they doing this to me? Why can't you understand? And instead of that, asking what questions? What do I need to understand more about this situation in order to communicate better? What do I need from myself and the people around me? What do I need to do next? Or who do I need to talk to get more information? Sometimes the questions you ask yourself will lead you in a better direction than just feeling how you feel, because that's just neurons and synapses and emotional responses that come from deep-seated unconscious places, and they don't always lead you in the right direction. So I believe in a heavy dose of logic and executive function, as well as understanding that your feelings are a piece of the dynamic but not the whole picture.
So I guess something when it comes to feelings is like I'm traditionally not like a super emotional person.
What?
And I know, as you might know. And I guess as we've kind of gone through the business development and career and all that good stuff, I've I don't want to say like I've suppressed my emotions too much, but like I just kind of go through the motions and I think it to myself, if I just continue with these habits as long as humanly possible, I'm going to find success in what I'm doing. And to me, like I feel as if there's some discomfort in that just in general because you're thinking so much about the business that you kind of like forget to like address like your whys and the feelings behind things. And then after like 6 to 8 years, you end up with this business and these practices and kind of, I'll say, habits that may not be aligned with exactly how you're feeling. So I guess the question then becomes is like, how do you identify kind of like what's a useful thing to pay attention to? Is suppression ever like a good thing? Like, how do you read into that?
Great question, and I mean that sincerely. Just because you are climbing the ladder of success does not mean that it's leaning against the right wall. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I use it
Hmm.
all the time. And I think it's this difference between zooming in and zooming out. They need to interact together. Too much logic, no good. Too many feelings, no good. And it's almost this like, I think it was Aristotle's golden mean, right? Of too much water, no bueno. Not enough water, no good. It's like you need to find a healthy, I don't like the word balance, so I refuse to use it, but a healthy interaction between the two on either side of the scale there. So I think part of this also is understanding that, again, that self-awareness piece of sometimes I can compartmentalize in a way. I'm not going to use, suppression. We'll use compartmentalization instead.
That's a better word.
I think there's a time and a place for healthy compartmentalization. When I work with the Brown surgeons, I have an in-house contract there. We talk about this. I don't want my surgeons having an absolute meltdown over the breakup with their significant other while my mother is open on their table. No, I need you to compartmentalize in a way to do your job. After the surgery is done, when you get home, when you have space, yes, unpack that. You can't just stuff it in and wait for it to rear its ugly head when, you're tired, exhausted, hungry, and somebody looks at you the wrong way. But there needs to be a time and a place for both of those things. And I think that as a society, we have in the past leaned too hard into put it in the box, tape it up, put it in the back of the garage, and maybe next Christmas we'll unpack it. Now I think a little bit of times we're talking more about feelings, but I feel us going the other way too of if you feel something, feel it and feel it deeply. I want to add an asterisk to that of when you feel it and how you feel it and where you feel it also matters. So again, like there's a time and a place for those things. For your question specifically, I think it's about having loving critics in your life, which I know you do with Wheeler, which I know you do in your relationships and stuff.
Yep.
I think having people that you trust to tell you, listen, you could have handled that a little bit differently. Or that's why people like me exist, right? In life of executive coaching or therapists to reflect back, like, hold on, did I hear that right? Like somebody in your office came into you crying and you're like, hey, did you get the morning report done? Instead of saying, like, let's take a second and let's have a moment being like, are you okay? What's going on? Work is work. We need to address this. What's up? So
Yeah.
I think like that's kind of what when you ask that question, which is a really great one. Hopefully I did justice a
It
little
was
bit in the
perfect.
answer there.
Yeah. And I think for me, like a lot of the things you see online right now is just like about de-stressing and not having stress in your life and all that kind of other things too.
Impossible.
Which is impossible, and to be honest, like, I've always enjoyed a certain level of stress, and to me, it's, like, kind of fueling in a way, and if I don't have that level of stress, I always feel like I need to put that stress back on me. Maybe stress isn't the right word, but, like, a certain level of pressure I find enjoyable to a certain extent because I'm just a kind of competitive person, and I just enjoy that, but there has to be, I'll say, like, a delineation between, like, too much stress being destructive and then, like, a healthy balance with the stress too.
Yes, yes. There's research that shows that healthy levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone, they actually keep us alive. If you were too calavere, if you were like, I'm just gonna run across 95 because it's easier to get there, right? Like there's something about that that keeps us safe, literally. Like we need a certain level of cortisol in our brains. I have never met somebody that is stress free. No matter how much money they have in the world, right? It's not the answer. I think that defining what peace looks like and making sure there are parameters to peace because it's not always going to be totally peaceful and knowing when it gets out of bounds is the thing that I think is a more valuable skill than trying to so hard have no stress in your life. Like from this chair, you're wasting your energy trying to have zero stress instead
Right.
of reallocating that energy into understanding where your boundaries are and what warning signals there are when things are out of whack and what you need to do to get back within those parameters.
Do you think there's like one emotion just in general that's like fairly misunderstood amongst high performers? Is it stress? Is it something else? Like, is there a through line on that?
I think focus is something that I've talked lots about, especially with significant others or especially with support staff. This idea, maybe that's not like an emotion necessarily, concentration. High performers, when they get into a groove, and Wheeler, I know you write as well, and like when you're in that flow state, there's something about allowing somebody to continue to go so they can do deep work. And I think sometimes we see that as dismissive or they're not paying attention, but all the research that I've seen is that, and I think I said it on the last podcast, is that when you are interrupted, it takes about 23 minutes to get back into a deep state of thought, work, flow, whatever you want to call it. So I think what's misunderstood is this idea of I'm not paying attention or I'm not listening or I don't care when a lot of high performers that I work with are locked in and they need that time to ideate on stuff. Now, again, like we talked about before, if you're sitting at dinner and your kid is trying to tell you about their day, that's probably not the time to lock into your emails. And that's where I think we need healthy separation between work and life. But I do think that allowing yourself time to have deep focus, to do deep work, is going to hopefully refuel the passion of why you started whatever career you started to begin with, and allowing the other people in your life to know that and to make sense of that, especially if you're at work and not taking their phone call or not answering their text or not chit chatting, but allowing you to know that about yourself and allowing the people around you to understand that about you, I think is like something that's misunderstood a lot and is a really healthy thing when everybody's on the same page. And again, there are parameters in place to keep it healthy for everyone.
Yeah, it's funny because this morning I was writing and it took me a long time to get into it because I was paying the January tax. And Tori walked in and said good morning, and I promptly ignored her. Like, I responded, but I didn't like stop thinking and writing. I didn't turn around, I don't think, and talk to her. And I probably should have just had the door shut, and that would be a signal that, like, hey, I'm doing this and I don't want to be rude, but I could be rude. And I feel like being present in the moment, like when you talk about the flow, that's a really great opportunity to be present. It's almost like meditative. When my family and I were skiing in Stowe over the break, that was one of the things we did to unplug. And there's one trail that goes from the very peak of that mountain. It goes, 3.5 miles down. It's kind of like a meandering, very peaceful trail. And it's almost meditative for me. It's very easy to be present in the moment. It's also just in general easy to be present when I'm skiing because there's a lot to pay attention to. And so I think that's one of the things I'm learning that I really like about skiing. And I'm learning this for the first time as I say it out loud to you right now, because that's the way I have to say things out loud to understand things. But the compartmentalizing is, I think you're right, can be a superpower, but I have a really hard time doing that sometimes. It's almost like it works really well for me when I need to focus and be a high performer. And it works against me when I need to be present with my family. It's really hard for me to turn that on and off. And I think that that's something that's probably like a fairly universal experience.
Yeah. Think about it too, right? There's a lot of dopamine hits you get from doing your job. And I'm not saying your family doesn't have that, but there's something about you chose this path to go down to be in this career. And you guys are lucky enough to have now rewarding, you're being rewarded for all your hard work. And there is dopamine attached to that. And sometimes being able to figure out problems and puzzles almost and problem solve, especially if your brain likes to do that, you're going to be more drawn to that. Now, on the family life, asterisk everybody listening, I'm not saying families are mundane and boring and, super stressful and work is not, but sometimes at
Definitely not.
home, sometimes at home, there is this like the dishes, the cleaning, if you have young children, I have 4-year-old twins, like the fight about who gets what cup, right? Like the dopamine hits sometimes feel far and few between, even though you love your family and you're there with them. And there are such high highs and rewarding moments. But a lot of family life is maintenance. And there is that like, can we just keep the house clean? Did we pay our bills? And that's why it's incredibly important to make time with your significant other, to have time with your children. When you go on vacation, it truly is about quality in terms of like your presence with them and not the quantity of how many vacations you can go on or can afford or anything like that. So I do think that there is something to be said about why we lean into work a lot in that way, and also how we might need to restructure how we are present in other places. I'm a big fan of seeing individuals as corporate athletes. You need to warm up for your day. Like you just don't like hop on the track or hop on the field or whatever. You would pull a muscle, especially if you're our age. Like you would hurt yourself. You need to stretch. Um, and you need to cool down. So this idea of taking the long way home, if you need more time, take the back roads to your house. If you have a particular problem that's on your brain and it's percolating, take the long way home unless there's something you absolutely need to get home to. Communicate that with your significant other, very important. But give yourself more time to then kind of have your cool down, and then get ready as you pull in the driveway, take some deep breaths so that way you're ready to transition hats, put your dad, husband, whatever, wife, significant other hat on, and re-enter into another domain, because that's really and truly what it is. Your skill set at work is rarely appreciated or is applied in the same way as it at home. And that's okay. It's not supposed to be the same. We just need to get out of our own way of thinking that it should be. So, you know, that I think is incredibly important, of like what you do at work and how you behave at home, and those two things, they need to be separate and different, and how you delineate physically how you separate, and emotionally and mentally how you separate the two and transition into the other one, that's a skill set worth exploring and investing into.
Wheeler and I don't know if Wheeler's discussed this with you, but we have this exercise where we have leading words for the year. And basically what you
Guiding
do
words,
is
Colin. Guiding words.
guiding
If you
words.
if you don't say it the right thing, Jessica's corner is going to attack you for getting everything wrong. So
Guiding words. And basically what it is you frame out kind of something that you want to work on for the year, like a theme almost for the year. Wheeler, yours is bravery, right? And mine's identity. Because like I want to come across as a certain identity throughout the year and identify with someone. The professional athlete thing that you just mentioned resonates very well for me because like at work, I want to perform, I want to do certain tasks, I want to get things done, like I want to be a rock star there. But it's so difficult to change the identity on the trip home. And I constantly find myself when I get home, I'm like, to Kaylee, I'm like, babe, did you get the water sample done for the new house? Like, did you get the dishes done? Did you do this? Did you do that? And I like have this whole list. And then she's like, I just need to go away from you for a while until you like stop being that person. And then we can come back and have a discussion. So it's almost like the identity is two different people. And to disconnect between the two of them, like you need to have that space. That's why I now go to the gym after work. But anyway, yeah, it's separating.
Mm-hmm. And you can't change who you are, right? Like you are who you are in some aspects. Like I want everyone to understand what the values are behind that. And there is a time and a place to run through the list. And to be fair, it may not be the second you walk in the door, because I too would walk away from Jimmy. I'd be like, yeah, no, absolutely not. Take your children.
Right.
I'm going to go hide in the bathroom for a bit. I'm all set. And it's so interesting because you talked about like, you and Wheeler are pretty much married, right? In some aspect, and you have your own relationships at home and they can echo each other. But also professionalism is a thing that doesn't necessarily exist at home. Like I'm not being professional with my husband. There's a certain mask that gets dropped when I walk in, and your family does sometimes get the I'll say worst side of you, and I don't mean it that way. It's just the word that's coming to mind. They get that kind of raw, real side of you because you've been professional all day. You literally used your critical thinking skills all day. And there's actually science that shows that we run out of F's to give by the end of a certain kind of a subset of time or energy expenditure, which really means if you've been problem solving all day, at some point you give up and you start behaving badly. That's literally what it is. And they did all these tests about it. And the best way to combat that is to remove triggers. And what that means is you need to identify what really bothers you, and you need to put in place a structure to kind of go around the trigger, not the issue, the trigger. And that way it's almost energy expenditure in the meantime. I mean, in your world, for the people that are listening to this financial stuff, it's budgeting. It's budgeting 101.
Right.
Being able to mitigate, stocks, costs, whatever, that have very little return on investment, and Occam's razor, get rid of them so you can invest in other things because your only budget is finite.
right,
Right.
yeah. There's a limited. I always look at it, there's like a limited amount of energy that you can expel right in
Yes.
one day, and you have to recharge. And now I drive electric vehicles, so I'm all about finding opportunities to recharge. But I do think that the identity aspect of this is really interesting to me, and I know it's Colin's guiding word, but we share everything. So I think the identity that you have at work, like I think we spend so much time trying to figure out like who I want to be, like holistically, like how are we trying to come across into the world. And I think in the work that we do, Colin and I do, and I think that you do as well, Daryl, your identity is very mixed up in it. The personal can be very mixed up in it. And, not everybody has that opportunity, but it can be overwhelming to have that opportunity to think about like, who I am on this YouTube episode versus who I am at the family dinner table. Is that the same person? Don't I want it to be the same person? Whereas you can compartmentalize and you can have like your work identity. Sometimes my daughter and Jess, they like to pick on me because they say that I have different voices when I talk to different people on the phone. Like if you call Daryl, I might sound different than if Colin calls me. And I've noticed that, Colin, you have different identities when you're talking to a prospective employee than when you're talking to a client. And we
Yes.
have these different kind of like personas and masks and faces that we put on. Is it possible for those to be the same thing all across the board? Should they be, or should they be compartmentalized?
No, you don't want me talking to you sometimes the way I talk to Jimmy or when I'm on a girls trip or like I believe we are allowed to be and have different parts of ourselves that we can showcase at a time. And that's again my opinion on it. I think authenticity should run through each of your hats that you wear. This is how we, if you look at evolutionary psychology, this is how we learn how to survive. We assimilate into the context in which we are put. And that can be a good thing where, okay, that's sales, right? That's business. Or I feel completely at home with my friends here because I have really found the right group. Or weird, I feel performative in this friend group and I don't like it. Pay attention to that.
Mm.
I think there's something about authenticity that rings true in the question about identity. I see it more as a Frankenstein. You are stitched together by all these different parts that make a whole you, but the electricity, which would be the authenticity, needs to run through in order for that thing to power, in order for it to move and, everything succinctly work together. So I try to live very authentically. Who I am, my core values at the end of the day will ring true no matter what voice I put on or no matter what hat I am wearing. It might be packaged a little differently. I mean, if you're hanging out with me in Jersey, there's a lot more F bombs that I'm throwing around than, if I'm lecturing at Brown or Harvard. So I think there's a time and a place for things. And to me, that's maturity. That's understanding that you can have different hats you wear, you can have different parts. And at the core, the heart beats, so to speak, and pushes kind of blood into all of these different limbs to make it move. And that's your authenticity and your purpose and your passion and all these other things that we talk about and values, and getting to the core of that is important.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of one thing we've talked about in the past as a team is toxic positivity, right? It's,
Mm,
pretending that everything is okay when it's not okay, saying, not saying the things, that leaving things unsaid. This actually kind of goes back to what Colin was saying earlier in the conversation here. If you're somebody who kind of comes out into the world and says, I'm not emotional, so don't talk to me about your emotions, then things are going to be left unsaid and people can just pretend that everything's fine. But, you want to be authentic in the workplace, everywhere you go. You have to just stop pretending that everything is okay.
yeah. And I think understanding that about yourself, that self-awareness piece, that to me is the most valuable thing that you can do for yourself, is to invest in your own self-awareness. To even be able to say, like, I know I'm not that emotional. I'm trying to work on holding space for that. So if you come to me with something emotional, just know that I am processing extra hard to get there with you. It's not that I don't care. It's just that I'm working on that. That to me is a great boss. It's a great manager. It's a great leader, because I can let you know this is where I'm at and I might mess up sometimes, and that's okay. And I need you to give me that grace as well, that I might not get it right all the time, but I'm at least communicating with you that I am working on it. And hopefully I am following through on working on that. But like Wheeler and Colin, like you're never going to be like each other. Like if you were like, I really want to be like Wheeler and I want to do that more, I'd be like, why?
Who
Why?
doesn't really?
Exactly. But I'd be like, but why? Because you are diminishing some of the skill sets that you bring to the table. And Wheeler, if you were like, I want to have organizations and lists and I want to have a process and I want to be more like Colin, I'd be like, right. But at what point are you wasting your time trying to do that when you have a partner that can support you with that? How do we bring the best of you, your strengths to the table to make this a cohesive unit and make this something that you guys work on together and can help each other with in the best parts of yourself, rather than trying to emulate something somebody else has when you could be fostering your own strengths in the process.
So, yeah, I think that that's super useful to think about. And we often talk to clients and we find them like going down these paths that don't necessarily like align with who they are as people, or like stuck in jobs or stuck in situations or started these businesses that they're unhappy with. And, maybe on paper they're successful, but maybe mentally they're not. So, I guess like at what point do you identify that maybe the identity that you've created doesn't like jive with yourself? And how do you create that self-awareness? And one thing that you mentioned before was like a performative friend group. Like, how would you identify something like that, that, you're kind of in a situation that you shouldn't be? And then how do you correct for that?
Mm. This is where feelings come into play. Feelings shouldn't be an instruction manual, but they're absolutely data points. They're like the check engine light in your car. So if you're like, every time I'm around these people, I hate it. Like I'm walking on eggshells. Like I feel like they don't really understand what I'm saying. My jokes aren't landing. Like people are whispering, and I'm like, again, that those are feelings. We need to have facts. Maybe somebody is talking about a surprise party they're throwing you, and that's why they're whispering in the corner. Or maybe like everyone is saying like, we love you, you got to get out of your own head, and you're not hearing it. But I do think that those feelings are the check engine light to do some kind of soul searching into, okay, well, what are you looking for? What are you trying to have as the element of quote success here? When I sat with you guys, and the first thing I do with all clients is tell me your definition of success. What does it look like? Because really, at the end of the day, most people have success as a feeling and they never feel successful, which is a trap because you could always be doing more. You could always be doing better versus operationally defining what success looks like for you, your marriage, your team, your business. And it's not just make X amount of money in Q1. It's again the values that we bring to the table. You could make a ton of money and be like, I hate everyone here. And to your point, that's misalignment. That's probably not going to be very sustainable for you. Those are the golden handcuffs we talk a lot about, especially with high
Yeah.
performers and high net places. So I think it starts with a feeling, and then what you do with that, that's what matters.
Do you think, just as kind of like an aside, and this could go down a big rabbit hole, so I apologize. Do you think like success is achievable just in general?
Depends how you define it. I think Barbara
Okay.
Streisand says success is having 3 honeydew melons and only eating the top half of each 3. So it depends how you describe what success is for you and the parameters or lack thereof that you put on what success means.
See,
Yeah,
I
I
think
feel like
that's
that's always something that we talk about, is
yeah.
like always reframing our success and goals and things like that, because the moment you hit a goal doesn't necessarily mean that you have happiness. It just means that you're probably going to reset to a new goal.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's
usually it means
goal
that you're not
chasing.
happy.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're chasing goal after goal after goal and not celebrating them and not looking ahead, back, zooming in, zooming out, doing all the things that I like to do with clients, at the end of the day, you're just chasing one goal after another until you retire, until you die. And that feels very macabre. But for a lot of people, like that's it. They were so singularly focused and, one track minded that they didn't stop and realize, weird, why am I working this hard? For what? What is it all for? So I'm a big fan of people sitting down and defining what success looks like professionally, what it looks like personally, and what it looks like familially. And maybe there's another dimension that you want to add in as well. But once you write down analog, pen to paper, not on your laptop, not on your computer, like I want you to write down what success is. And I want you to start to see the common thread that shows up in each. And you'll start to see those are values. And I want you to then start to create process and goals around the values you've identified versus the ideas of success or what your family said success was or what your significant other is expecting of you. That to me is incredibly important and wildly freeing.
We've been trying to get
Feels
into journaling more, so we'll
yes,
have to
it's
do that
true.
exercise.
I received a couple of journals for the holidays. The universe, or at least the people around me, are telling me I need to journal more. But listening to this, it really feels so kind of like modern and forward thinking to take time to identify and define success in all these areas. Like I can't imagine that my mom did this, right? Or that her dad did this, or all these generations in the past did, and yet they were successful. Do you feel like perhaps we're a little bit more obsessed with success now than we used to be, or defining success? Or are we just like more free to define success? Like, why is it that we've had, historically speaking, all of these successful people in the world that weren't taking time to define success? And now we are, and maybe that's becoming more work and more cumbersome for us.
It's if I were to really think, my gut reaction is you would have to look at evolutionary psychology. If you looked at the greatest generation, is kind of what their generation is called, or the traditionalists, however you label them, they lived through the Great Depression. So their definitions of success and psychologically, each of us have our own psychological markers generationally. That's fascinating if you really look at the research around it. So those who were born in the Great Depression era are going to look at what success means very differently. And it's going to be centered around themes of stability or fear of lack, or, scarcity. That's the word I'm looking
Scarcity
for.
mindset. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. So there's a big scarcity in mindset. Now they had the baby boomer generation. So think about the parenting that those children received and the jobs that they went into. And then think about baby boomers. I got my first job at 19 and I stayed at the company for 60 years and I retired with my watch and my
Pension and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
exactly. So again, like the elements of loyalty, of somebody is treating you well, you don't leave that company. They've treated you well. They've done well by you. I think that's something that they had been fed into, but they weren't necessarily happy. Now you think about Gen X millennials, and they were taught, seek out something happy. Like we want you to have a life. We didn't have a life. We want you to have more than we had, right? And on and on and on it goes. And you can kind of pull apart each of these generations, and we could talk another hour about that. But I think that to answer your question, I don't know if we're more or less obsessed with success. I feel like the psychological markers are such that we have been taught or we have been guided to be more introspective about these things based on our parents. And I'm speaking in blanket terms. Not everybody's parents were like this, but I'm speaking as like generation and research around generations. I think that at some point it becomes a hindrance. If all you do is journal, I don't want you filling up all of your journals at once, Wheeler. If all you do is journal and there's no action, there becomes an issue in that as well. But I love the idea of being contemplative and taking some time. It's like strategic planning for your life in a way that matters. But then you need to go and do something about it. Because I fear that our generation and even the younger generation has more analysis paralysis than the older generations who kind of did and didn't think. And it goes back to that Aristotle, the golden mean kind of conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of people or podcasts or whatever it might be that will reach out and have these ideas about new businesses or things they want to do and goals and all these kinds of other things, and then like a year later you check in and then nothing happened. And versus like if you were to go back to our parents generation, there's no like necessarily, I mean, I'm sure there's idea generation, but it's all about action. And I can say, looking at my own parents, it's very action based, kind of less, I'll say, like reflective in regards to like the journaling and, the thought exercises and things like that. It's all about like get shit done. And, that's reflective of, I think, that generation in general.
100%.
I like the idea that, we're evolving, right? And that we're continuing to grow and compound that growth. And as leaders, like if we're continuing to look for opportunities to, I guess, define success or reflect or identify who we want to be, it's nice. I guess it's almost like we're very fortunate to have this opportunity to do that. Business owners, we're fortunate that we get to try to build and cultivate, a work environment that we're proud of, that we want to spend time in. Hopefully other people want to spend time in too. And I think that identifying all these feelings and data points and recognizing what to do with them is excellent. And I worry that we do overthink things. And Colin and I we have lots of ideas, all the ideas in the world, and we want people to execute our ideas for us or alongside us. But at what point are we just like satisfied, or can we reach some sort of like content level while still growing? It feels like those two things are sometimes in conflict with each other.
I think it depends the narrative that you feed yourself. Sometimes you can be satisfied with growth because growth is the marker of success, right? And it's very philosophical. It depends how you look at it, really and truly. If growth to you is reaching these goals and they're unobtainable, or striving and reaching your best. And if you're not feeling like you thought you would when you reach those goals, I say stop worrying about the feeling you're going to feel reaching your goals, because that's the wrong metric. That's the wrong marker. Because for high performers, the bar keeps getting raised higher. And time you reach a goal, your brain starts to say like, well, yeah, because I'm a high performer, I set out to do it. That was the goal, to do it. But now it's on to the next thing. And this is why I want people to have a life also outside of work. Friends that you enjoy, hobbies that you like, things that stimulate your brain. Bill Hetler has this whole kind of research about all the different domains of wellness, social, intellectual, financial wellness is a part of that. Like there's all these different things. And I truly believe that if you look at the dimensions of wellness, they create this circle. And just like a tire, if one part of your tire is flat, you're not like, oh, that's fine. Like it's my social wellness but it's still running. Like, no, your tire's flat. Like it's a problem. It can impact the car. So we have to check in on our dimensions of well-being or wellness, because I think that's where people get a little lopsided. They put so much into being successful professionally that the other things falter. And you need to be able to figure out what that scale looks like for you, because yes, it does take a lot of time and energy to be successful. I look at Michael Jordan, right? That kind of singular track mind, and what did he give up in the process? And when he no longer played basketball, how did he behave? There's something to be said about when you are so dedicated to success, I think that everyone is going to have different kind of like a sliding scale on where they put their markers, but it's important to know that you're doing that intentionally again, and it's not being set for you or unconsciously by you.
I think in regards to that, something that I've always kind of struggled with was the pieces of the pie getting bigger and smaller at different intervals of like my life. And, when you just first come out of college and you're a single guy or woman and, you're just doing your job and then going out with your friends at night, the pieces of the pie where it's like the family, the home life, the maintenance of certain, assets and things like that aren't even part of your picture. But then you focus on your job for so long, and then all of a sudden you have like a family pie that's fit in. You've got like other responsibilities that fit in. You've got whatever it might be. And then to have to like adjust and slide your scale to now make those things a bigger piece is where I've always struggled a little bit, just even getting married and family and all that kind of other stuff. That wasn't on my radar a few years ago. And then you get married, and then all of a sudden it's like a thing you have to think about. And that to me, that sliding scale is something that I have found is one, exciting because I enjoy change in general, but two, something to always keep in mind that these new life events come in that make your pie different.
Get I get like frustrated when people are like, we all have the same 24 hours in the day as Beyonce. No, we don't. No,
No,
we don't.
no, we don't.
We sure don't. Like one of my kids climbed into the sink and decided to like wash her pajamas while they were still on her. Like, no, we don't have the same 24 hours in the day, ma'am. It's different. And I'm not saying mine's worse or harder. It just means some days we have more on that proverbial plate. The pie slices are not working, and we don't have all the staff that Beyonce does. Like there isn't necessarily that help. You might be a single parent. You might be, dealing with health issues. Like Spoon's theory kind of talks about this of, sometimes it takes somebody 5 spoons to do the same thing it takes your 1 spoon to do. And that's sometimes a good reminder that you are tasked with figuring that out at any given moment and setting kind of the scale for yourself, because it will change and slide. And if you resist that, think about all that energy. If that's triggering for you, you are losing that energy. That is a loss that you cannot write off and you cannot recruit, because you only get so many hours in the day. Instead of taking a look, again, zooming out, all right, here's what this is today. This is what I have due. All right, my marriage feels really good. I can lean maybe into work a little bit more. My kids are healthy. Nobody's getting like hand, foot, and mouth from daycare. Like, okay, great. Let me focus on work while I have the chance. But maybe it's like, okay, I need to focus on my marriage a little bit more. We need to connect. It's a slower season. I'm going to lean into my life a bit. Or, my kid's starting baseball and I want to coach. That's important to me. That's a value that I, need to execute on. So that's what I'm doing. And it might mean I need to leave the office a little bit early, or that's one less client. You cannot possibly have it all, but I think there is a way to make room to have what fills you up so it feels like more than enough.
Mm.
Yeah, that feels like a really great place to end it, Daryl. And we really appreciate you being here and bringing your expertise to us. And we encourage our listeners to also check out Feelings and Other F Words, because it is a really, I'm curious about this 15-minute format, and if you were dragged kicking and screaming to that, or if it's something that you were excited to try as an opportunity.
I like short and sweet. I found that a lot of my listeners were working mothers or working parents. So they wanted things bite sized. They wanted the too long, didn't read kind of version of things. And I was happy to do that because I never want to add value that's not necessarily, helpful to people's lives. So if I can give you just enough and you want more, even better. DM me and I will send you everything that I know or point you in the right direction. But if you're like, oh, God, I need to listen to this episode because I like her, or I feel bad stopping, I'm doing it wrong. So I think the 15, 20-minute episodes are going to be something that's really cool and force me to be like, say what you got to say, girl, get it out. Don't sit there and, twirl it around. Give it to the people.
I love it.
Yeah, we might steal that from you, but not
Yeah.
today, because it was a wonderfully spent hour. Thank you very much for joining us for this hour, Daryl.
Yeah,
Thank
Daryl,
you.
this was a lot of fun.
It was. You guys are the best. I am Ko-Fi for life. So thank you guys for having me. And I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Absolutely. We definitely did. Awesome, Daryl. Well, thanks again.
Compound Growth with Wheeler and Colin, sponsored by Ko-Fi Advisors. Reach out today. Yay!